Hello, Shiver Seekers. Are you ready to follow us into the unknown? I'm Cynthia.
And I'm Stephanie. You found the dark oak. Today, I take you inside the accidental, intentional, unintentional, unnatural deaths of Dr. Gilbert Bogle and Margaret Chandler.
So, I think what I hear you saying, Stephanie, is that we have no idea what happened here.
Question mark, question mark, question mark.
Okay, perfect. Welcome to The Dark Oak, the mystery podcast with purpose. Each month, through our charity, the Branch of Hope Foundation, we give a portion of proceeds from our Patreon and sponsorships to a nonprofit related to the first episode of the month. And to find out more, stick around to the end of this episode, check out our website, thedarkoak.com, or head over to our Instagram, The Dark Oak Podcast.
Oh my goodness, Cynthia. Okay, well, if anyone is a social media follow of ours, specifically on Instagram, you saw that just a few days ago, I got my first tattoo.
Listeners, when you think of first tattoo, you think of my first tattoo, which I think maybe took 10 minutes to create. How long were you sitting in that chair, Stephanie?
Okay, so still not done yet. I was in the chair for 8 hours and I'm going back, and it is on a fairly visible part of my body. So even, the hardcore tattoo guys were like, oh man, you really went for it. But I was really glad Cynthia was there. This actually isn't a part of my life that I've shared fully on the podcast yet. I've alluded to it in different ways. But the tattoo is a memorial tattoo for my 2-year-old son who passed away 2 years ago. It was an accident, but it was really sudden. And as you can attest, Cynthia, it's really changed my life, and I think yours in some ways too, just perspective on things. We started this podcast not long after it happened. We had already talked about wanting to do a mystery podcast together, like a true crime podcast, but I needed something to keep my mind busy, and writing and editing and researching was good for me. It was good for my mind. It was good to just have something to keep me occupied in some of those quiet hours. But it morphed into this thing where I can relate to other parents that have lost children. And I think it's made me a much more empathetic podcaster. And I think that's why our Branch of Hope has come around. I know it was important to you as well. But again, it just changes the lens of everything. My little guy, his name was Sebastian, and he loved Toy Story. It was his favorite thing ever. So my tattoo is a little tattoo of Buzz Lightyear and Woody, and it says "To Infinity and Beyond" with his little nickname on it. I'm 4 days out, and it is very itchy and stingy. I don't know if that's a natural tattoo thing. I guess it is, but zero regrets. And again, I've told Cynthia, thank you so much for being up there. Not only is it 8 hours of a full color, fairly large tattoo, which is already pretty strenuous, but obviously it was a very emotional journey as well. So many of my friends and my family members were reaching out to me all day, asking how it was going, asking how I was doing. And, just emotional. My husband and I both cried when I got home when he saw it, and just kind of been an emotional journey. But I appreciate all of our listeners who have been so empathetic, not necessarily to my story because I haven't shared it up until this point, but to all the parents that have lost children out there, whether they've lost them to an unnatural cause of death or they've just been missing. All the parents that I have personally talked to, that's kind of where I start. Is I'm not just here to exploit your story. I'm here because I understand. And if we can give you any amount of comfort or a small amount of peace, even if it's just to talk about it, like what that feels like, to have that emptiness, to feel, like there's this piece of your heart that's never going to be there again. I've explained it like I'm a different person now than I was. And I mean that truly. I'm not saying it's positive or negative. I'm just a changed human being. There's a part of me that left. But then there's this other part, this piece that I attribute to my faith, but there's this piece of my faith that's helped to provide a little bit of the salve, but it's still always close to my heart. And I decided to talk about it on the podcast today, mostly because I got the tattoo in a visible place because I still want Sebastian to be part of our ongoing life. And my two older boys, who I truly credit them for me still being alive right now, but they are so social and so active that people comment on them all the time. They're asking how they're doing, they're commenting about what they're doing, but I don't necessarily get the same with Sebastian because not everybody sees him. And so this was kind of an outward way of people being able to ask about him and then to talk about him. So I feel like by posting that picture of me getting it on social media, I'm like, okay, this is the start of that. This is the start of me finally having the strength to talk about it and feeling open enough to talk about it, even though I'm teary right now, but he's still a part of my family and a part of my story. And now he's a tattooed part of my body. So that's kind of my journey. So any moms and dads, or really anybody who's gone through the loss of a child, I don't know your story, but I understand a bit of what that feels like. And Cynthia has seen me go through it. And so she gets it as much as you can, from an outside perspective, but she gets it too. So all that to say, we all have our journeys. We all have the hard spots that we go through. Be kind, because you never know. You never know what someone's story is. But also know, if you are listening to us and you have gone through something like that, like, we get you. There is light. Cynthia and I fully believe in hope. I grieve every day, but I grieve with hope. I grieve with that hope that I'm going to see him again. Everybody has their own spiritual and religious journey, but for those parents that feel the same, it's nice to have that same spirit, moving forward. We're all just praying for each other on what a happy day that will be when we get to see, our kids again. Wow, that was like heavy right off the bat. I think I was just ready to go because I'm like, I need to get through this without thinking too much about it. But that is my story. So little Sebastian is a part of this podcast. And yeah, it's nice to say his name.
Yes, and you have done such a beautiful job in honoring him. And
you can't cry because then I'm going to cry, Cynthia. Cynthia's like, it's so dusty in this room. I'm like, stop lying.
One thing Stephanie and I have done a lot of together is crying. And, but that is part of the story here. And Stephanie and her family are such special people. And little Sebastian was such a special person and is loved and remembered every day.
Ooh, okay. Maybe I should have done this in a case that you were presenting, Cynthia, so I could just sit here in the corner. Oh my goodness. But no, we are going to get into it because actually this is a really unsolved case and I find it really interesting. So I guess if I'm going to present a case, it might as well be one that's really interesting. So we are going to get into this. Have you heard of this? It's been out for a while as one of the great unsolved death cases. It comes from Australia and it's Dr. Bogle and Margaret Chandler. Does that sound familiar to you at all?
The names don't sound familiar to me, no.
Well, this is an absolute head scratcher. Now, as I've said, it sadly involves the death of two individuals. But the part that makes it so strange, as you've already pointed out, is we have no idea what caused these two deaths. Like, question mark, question mark. The most common theories point to some kind of poisoning, but we don't know if it was accidental, intentional, if it was self-inflicted, or administered by someone else. Like, we kind of don't know anything except the fact that these were not natural deaths.
Which is all kinds of terrifying.
Isn't it? Isn't it?
It really is. It is.
All right. The scene is 1863 Australia in a suburb of Sydney called Chatswood. And just to get you in the right headspace, remember the 60s was when we started to see a big shift in all kinds of social structures. We have a big shift in the civil rights movement. This is the decade that Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech. We have the hippie movement and the idea of free love, combined with the women's rights movement and the approval of the contraceptive pill. And then politically, we have the Cold War going high speed, bringing on the constant concern and fear that nuclear war was imminent. So a lot of things happening in the social, political, financial climate right now. So it was kind of a weird decade to begin with. So the fact that these very weird deaths happened in that decade, I'm like, yeah, that figures.
Right. That checks.
Exactly. However, it's unlikely that any of these things were on the minds of two boys in the early morning hours of January 1st, 1963. Their goal as they walked through the respectable middle-class city of Chatswood was to comb the riverbanks of the Lane Cove River to find stray golf balls.
Oh, okay. I've heard of people doing this, like combing places looking for golf balls.
I find that very random, but yeah, apparently it's a thing. At 7:45 a.m., along a narrow dirt track by the river, the boys saw a man in a suit lying face down on the ground. They thought he was probably just drunk. After all, this was like the early morning of New Year's Day, so I can see how they assumed he was sleeping off the effects of some wild, like, New Year's Eve party. But when they came back an hour later and they found him in the same position, they decided to check it out. Unfortunately, what they found was a deceased man. When the police arrived, they found the man had a purplish patch on his face and blood had trickled from his right nostril, but there were no outward signs of violence. Strangely, while from a distance appeared the man was dressed, like he had clothes on, it turned out he was not. Instead, he was naked from the waist down, and it appeared as though someone had painstakingly placed his pants over his body, like covered his legs like he was wearing it. And he was also not wearing any underwear.
That's weird.
Isn't that strange?
Yeah.
Papers in his wallet identified him as Dr. Gilbert Bogle. Now, while investigating the scene, officers made another disturbing discovery. 20 yards away, in a shallow dip right on the edge of the river, under a few sheets of old cardboard, and I have heard these described as like beer box cardboard, there was the body of a woman. Now, she was lying face up. The skirt of her floral dress was bunched up around her waist. Her bra had been pulled down to expose her breast, and her own panties had been removed and lay by the riverbank several feet away. However, there was a pair of men's underwear lying between her bare feet. Her dress was muddy, as were her feet and knees.
Oh, this is weird.
Again, there was no sign of violence, but police did find human vomit and excrement at the scene. The woman was later identified as Mrs. Margaret Chandler, a wife and mother of a 9-month-old baby and a 2-year-old.
Wow. Okay. I'm curious to know the relation between her and the doctor.
Oh, it's interesting. Every part of this is interesting.
This feels violent to me. The fact that they're both undressed, I don't know. This feels violent. Hers especially feels violent. Yeah. Okay. I'm already disturbed.
This particular area was known as a bit of a lover's lane. So the fact that both individuals were partially nude made investigators think this was some kind of romantic rendezvous. But of course, they're both deceased. So it couldn't simply stop at that, right? Something else is afoot.
Sure. Yes.
Now, the fact that Dr. Bogle's car was found in working operation nearby, and there was a piece of carpet from the car placed on the ground, led investigators to believe that the couple had come to this location on their own. So maybe they really were coming there for a romantic rendezvous. And based on the state of the bodies, it appeared this could have been some poisoning, possibly while they were in the act of copulation, shall we say. However, if this was a poisoning, who covered their bodies? They clearly didn't cover themselves. Another person had to have been there for their bodies to be covered up after they died. So this wasn't just a cut and dried situation.
Right. Yeah.
In addition, it was discovered that both Gilbert and Margaret were married to other people and had only met 12 days earlier.
Oh, okay. The plot thickens because, I don't know, do you start an affair within 12 days?
As I said, Margaret was the mother of two, and she was the wife to CSIRO scientific photographer Jeffrey Chandler, who worked with Dr. Gilbert Bogle, who was a respected physicist and father of four. And Dr. Gilbert Bogle was kind of a big deal. He was a former Rhodes Scholar who was supposedly working on futuristic weaponry. So he was kind of a big deal at this scientific operation. CSIRO stands for the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, which is Australia's national science agency and one of the largest and most diverse research agencies in the world. Since its establishment in 1916, it has conducted scientific research to address national and global challenges across various fields, including agriculture, health, environmental, energy, manufacturing, and digital technologies. So, a very well-known and respected agency, which is another reason this case really garnered a lot of attention.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued. The fact that the doctor knows Margaret's husband. Okay, interesting.
And now you have this tie-in of possibly state secrets. To me, it all sounds a little Somerton Man up to this point.
Well, okay, yeah, sure, because I just watched Mission Impossible the other day, and this is the kind of thing you'd see in that movie.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Spies and that kind of thing. So I'm like, okay, this sounds like a movie.
Now, apparently, Gilbert, Margaret, and Jeffrey, so the doctor, Margaret, and Jeffrey, the married couple, were all at the same New Year's Eve party. And at some point in the party, Jeffrey tells Margaret that he's going to head to another party, apparently a less uppity party, to meet with his girlfriend, Pamela.
Oh,
Witnesses, I'll get there.
okay.
Witnesses saw Jeffrey and Margaret split amicably, like they gave each other a little kiss, and then Jeffrey left the party. At some point in the evening, Jeffrey headed back to the party with Pamela to collect Margaret. But Margaret tells him that she wants to stay at the party with Gilbert. So Jeffrey headed to his in-laws' house to collect their children, and then he and Pamela and the children spend the rest of the night together at Pamela's house.
All right, so we have an open marriage.
Yeah, before I go further, I should explain that both couples are participants in something called the Sydney Push. The Sydney Push was an intellectual subculture from the late 1940s to the early 1970s. The idea was that free love should be common practice, and they rejected most conventional morality and social norms. So, in effect, both couples were swingers, and both couples were aware of each other's openness. I don't know if that's the right word, but you know what I mean. They were aware that they were in an open relationship, like an open marriage.
Okay, well, see, for me, this already starts taking away motive because I'm thinking, okay, these two are caught together, a jealous spouse poisons them or kills them in some other way, but now you've taken away the jealousy. Presumably.
Kind of the way well, and that's kind of the way I presented it like that because investigators had a really hard time understanding open marriages. They weren't a thing in the 1960s. So even though it was explained to them that jealousy isn't a thing, take that off the table. And here's the deal. Even in open relationships, though, I've seen jealousy become a thing. So it should be something that's looked into. But for investigators, they couldn't even begin to grasp that this was an okay thing that was happening.
I can see that, especially in that time. It's a lifestyle that many don't, I guess, understand. So I can see why, if this isn't your thing, you might have a hard time wrapping your mind around it.
Especially in the 1960s.
Sure, when this was probably really, really naughty.
A really naughty idea. Very progressive. I don't know if that's the right word, but definitely before its time.
Sure.
Around 4 a.m., after Jeffrey and Pamela had long left the party, collected the kids, and returned to Pamela's house, Margaret and Gilbert left the party together. Now, police were clearly baffled right from the get-go at the scene of these deaths. During the autopsy, the coroner could find no reason for them to have died. No violence, nothing to indicate injury. And with the feeling that this could have been, again, back to a poisoning, because what else do we have at this point? Margaret and Gilbert's organs were sent away for testing. Now, think about the extent of poisoning we're talking about here. If you have no idea what the poison could be, of course, you have the common poisons used by murderers, like, the arsenic and the strychnine and the hemlock. But in this case, you also have the possibility of some kind of maybe toxin that was found in the food at the party, or even environmental toxin. They are outside in an open area. And remember, we're also in Australia, so there also could have been poisonous snakes or spiders,
Oh,
like a huge
sure.
amount of possibilities, right? So where do you
Sure.
even begin?
Yeah, I don't know.
So many possibilities. Now, while the testing was being completed, police turned their attention to the only suspect, Margaret's husband, Jeffrey. There was this concern that maybe he was saying the marriage was open, but it wasn't really. And again, it's just not the norm.
It's interesting that he's the only suspect because what about Gilbert's wife? And especially if this is a result of poisoning. I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I've heard that women are generally the poisoners because it's not so violent and messy. So my mind goes to her that sure, Jeffrey could have been a suspect, but the doctor's wife could be as well. If we're
I
going with
think
jealousy as
so.
a motive.
No, I totally see where your mind is going there. I have never seen her mentioned in any of the paperwork, so all I can think is she must have been ruled out immediately. Based on the fact
Okay.
that they had 4 kids, I would think she was at home with the kids, but maybe not. I don't know. I just assume that could be a total incorrect assumption.
Well, she could have been at home. It doesn't mean she couldn't have sent him a treat to take to his girlfriend that they enjoyed
Very
together
true.
later?
That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. Police were also a little put off by the fact that Jeffrey wasn't immediately emotional about his wife's death. But we've talked about that before. Like, out of context, that doesn't mean a lot to me on its own. Everybody has different reactions to trauma like that, to stress like that. So just because when he was at the coroner's office, surrounded by a bunch of other men in the 1960s, just the fact that he didn't pour his heart out and start crying doesn't mean a lot to me.
Sure. Sure.
But Jeffrey presented a very strong alibi. For starters, Pamela backed up all of his claims. Now, obviously, we're not going to sit here and just take Pamela's word for it because she could have strong motivation to lie. However, even Margaret's parents, who were the ones that were watching Margaret's children, confirmed that Jeffrey came and picked the kids up and that he was there. He didn't seem disturbed. Pamela was waiting for him in the car. They didn't see anything unusual. And then we have Jeffrey being at both of these parties. Remember, he was at the original party and he was at the party picking up Pamela, and multiple people saw him there. In addition, Jeffrey got really lucky because he drove a very identifiable car. It was a vintage Vauxhall, which is a really cool looking vehicle. And so it was easy to spot. So people saw him all night long, not anywhere near the scene of where Margaret and Gilbert were.
Okay. In all honesty, I don't really know a whole lot about poisoning. Again, we're going with the idea that they may have been poisoned. So I don't really know how that works, but until they know what it was that caused their deaths, they can't really say for sure how long before their deaths it would have been administered. So if it's something that takes, I don't know, 24 hours, which again, I don't know how poisons work, but you wouldn't be looking for them that night. You'd be looking for them maybe the night before.
I agree, but you also have the fact that their bodies were covered. So if they were poisoned previously, would someone have been following them around all night to then strangely cover their bodies?
Sure. Yeah, because I'm thinking, okay, is it possible they covered themselves? Okay, as a side effect, and again, this is probably not what happened, but as a side effect of whatever it was that killed them, could they get cold? And let's say they are in the middle of an intimate moment. And so they're in a state of undress. I don't know. Suddenly they get cold and he finds his pants and just kind of lays them on top of him as a blanket. And she just finds some cardboard boxes and lays it on top of her because they don't have the strength to go anywhere or do anything else, but they're cold. Again, I know that's a stretch. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Apparently, the way that Gilbert's pants were applied, again, they like wrapped around his legs. Like it probably would not have been something that he would have been able to do on himself.
Okay.
But we don't know for sure. But again, they were put on his legs so particularly that the boys literally thought he was dressed.
Sure. And then what are the odds that, she just happens to have a cardboard box next to her that she can cover herself up with? I mean,
I know, but yet not pull your dress down and pull your
sure.
shirt down.
Sure.
Like
Sure.
that doesn't track for me either. I get what you're saying. You got to look at every angle. But yeah, the idea is that someone else applied these either as they were dying or right after they were deceased.
That makes the most sense.
Next, investigators explored the possibility that Dr. Gilbert Bogle could have been the keeper of some kind of state secrets. Remember, this was during the Cold War, and because of Gilbert's role at the CSIRO, maybe he was targeted. But unfortunately, that also came to a dead end. As it turned out, he was never assigned to any top secret projects. So there was nothing that anyone could gain by eliminating him, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So investigators turned back to the forensic examination of the bodies to give them additional leads. But insanely, that too was failing. The coroner and toxicologists were struggling to find any traces of toxic material. However, the toxicologist did note changes in both of the bodies that he identified as significant. Firstly, the blood in both of the victims appeared purple in color. And to him, this meant poisoning as the most likely cause of death, but it could be any number of poisons. He also found that both Margaret and Gilbert had small changes to their hearts, which could indicate strychnine poisoning. However, there was no strychnine found in their systems. So on the subject of poisoning, it is not something I have covered very often. So I listened to the Buried Bones coverage of this case to see if I could get more details about testing for poisons and toxins. And really, it just all boils down to the fact that it gave me a good excuse to once again listen to Paul Hulse.
Your boyfriend.
Uh-huh. For anyone who doesn't know, Paul Hulse is a former cold case investigator known for his contributions to solving the Golden State Killer case. Fangirling over here. And I may or may not have a small crush on him. I digress.
You're not alone. Quite the fan following.
Yeah, well, count me
of the female persuasion, especially.
He also loves dogs. So, I mean, we're a match.
You are. Oh, Paul Hulse, if you're listening, hit us up.
You know what's funny? He and Kate have been advertising for a true crime cruise that they're going on. I can't remember the name of it right now. I kind of want to go, but every time I think about going, I get sweaty palms. So I'm like, okay, I can't do it. I just can't do it. You're too good, Paul Hulse. I'm not able to go on your cruise because you're too good.
I love it.
So Paul Hulse describes the way bodies are tested for toxins. And I thought his feedback was super interesting because I had questions like, is every toxin a different test? Are there like panels? You know how we get blood work? Is there just like a blood panel you can run? Or do you have to test for do you have to check the box of every toxin that you want to check? How does it work? And again, his answer was really informative. So I'm going to tell you his thoughts on the process. According to Paul, in modern toxicology, we have screening methods to find classes of substances. For example, if we want to find opiates, the screening method for opiates will see the various types of like all the opiates that someone could ingest or inject. Then if you get a positive for the opiates, you can slowly narrow down to the specific type using test methodology. But it really kind of does boil down to there's one test. You have to do a specific test for each one. You can find a group, but that doesn't tell you specifically which one. However, there are also standalone substances that require a separate test for each one. And Paul points out that the problem, especially in 1963, is that you have limited tissue sample size to work with, and each test requires a piece of tissue. And again, in 1963, when the tests were not super sensitive, you would need a good sized piece of tissue to get results. So at some point, you're literally going to run out of tissue to test, possibly before you've tested for everything you would like to test for. So I think in this case, that's kind of where they ended up.
Wow. I didn't realize that's how it works. I mean, it's really like a needle in a haystack in your best case scenario, right? I have heard people say we don't want to degrade the sample or we don't want to ruin the sample now until we have something more specific we can look for. But that really just paints a picture, right? That there's limited amount of tissue to test.
Limited amount of tissue to test. That's exactly right. So I thought that was interesting too. I had always heard it, but to really put it in bare bones like that and buried bones like that. No, that was terrible. Take that
What's
out.
funny is as soon as you said it, I was like, buried bones. My mind went there as well.
You did it too. Oh,
I
look how
did.
cheesy we are together.
Oh no. Well, it's a big surprise to that.
We're in a little cheese pot circle. So trying to narrow down what they should test for in the moment, police were immediately dispatched to retrace Margaret and Gilbert's steps and collect anything that could be of use in identifying what they need to test for. So investigators wound up testing all the plates and food scraps, cutlery, and empty bottles from the party where they were, because those could all be sources. They also inspected the scene of the crime for any bottles or syringes and also any poisonous plants or insects. The toxicologists on the case even wound up getting help from scientists around the world for ideas on what kind of poisonous compound this could be. Police investigated around 1,000 hypotheses for the cause of death, including cone shell poison, funnel web spiders, some kind of weird aphrodisiacs, and the drug LSD, which had recently come onto the market. But all of those were also negative.
Wow, interesting. I wouldn't have thought it was from the party because it's weird to me that they were the only two who ended up dead and there were several party goers. So unless someone specifically targeted them and directly went to their drinks and their plates, you would think more people would have either died or at least gotten sick if it had come from the party. So to me, it does kind of make sense. Maybe if they were doing something in the woods, like some little creature. But then again, the fact, Stephanie, that their bodies were covered up, man, that is what is really throwing a wrench in everything. Because I just don't get it. I don't even understand why, if they were murdered, someone covered them up. That doesn't make sense to me.
Right. Like, say they were poisoned at the party. Was somebody going to follow them to the woods and just wait till they die and then cover them up? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And so you think, was there someone else there? Maybe somebody else was there, like a third person who maybe gave them something. Actually, that was one of Paul Hull's theories, so I don't want to take credit for it. But he said, what if there was a third person there that kind of invited themselves into this sexual encounter? Could that person have poisoned them and then waited for them to die?
Actually, that scenario might make sense why they covered them up. Because the covering up wasn't to hide them. It was more to hide their dignity, it sounds to me.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Hiding their nudity. So that's why I'm just like, why would a murderer do that? But if the person who responsible, like you said, maybe cared about them, maybe was part of like a threesome type relationship or friends or some type of relationship where they actually cared about these people, that could potentially explain them wanting to cover them out of respect.
Right. But also kill them and then cover them.
Right. But we see that. Like, we'll see where someone, if they know their victim, sometimes after the fact, they'll cover them as a way of, I mean, it's screwed up, but, as a way of protecting them, protecting their dignity.
Yeah. Now, in 2006, an author and psychologist named Peter Butt released a documentary called Dr. Bogle and Mrs. Chandler, The Confession. In it, he explained, quote, "It was left to the toxicologist who had very limited resources to be able to deal with looking for the poison. He spent 13 months, literally day and night. He went through every possible poisoning looking for the killing agent. He spoke to experts around the world, in the FBI, and in Britain, and they couldn't help him. It was his last case, and he had to give up after the failure of not being able to find the answer."
That's wild. Is it possible there's a poison that like we don't know about yet? And so we can't test for it because we don't know it exists?
I think, yes, that's possible. Even now in 2025, that's possible for that to be the answer. And I think
and maybe it was an accident.
And maybe it was an accident. All the things.
Then why are they covered up? Then why are they covered up?
At this point, I feel like it's safe to say we don't know anything. It's safe to say we don't know anything.
At the beginning, you're like, maybe intentional, maybe accidental, maybe not. I mean, I am baffled.
Right. The only thing that is kind of plausible came out in this 2006 documentary presented by Peter Budd. So he kind of dedicated a lot of his life into investigating this case because it's just so weird and so unsolved. So I'm going to tell you his theory on the case. It's the only thing that checks a lot of boxes. However, for me, it still doesn't fill in all the gaps. So I'm interested to see what you think at the end.
Okay. Give me something, Stephanie, because right now I'm just like, I have no clue.
All right. Peter said the cause of death was related to the river itself. See, this particular river was notoriously polluted. As a matter of fact, in the 1940s and 50s, the local council received loads of letters from residents complaining of the smell of rotten eggs coming from the river. And apparently it was so gross that it even caused nausea and difficulty breathing. And there were a series of like massive fish kills. So obviously something isn't right here. At one point, the council was even considering evacuating homes from around the river because so many people were having difficulty breathing. So they wound up sending in instead a research company to figure out what it actually is, like what's causing the problem. So the Maritime Service Board conducted a year-long study of the river. It found that the bottom muds were saturated with hydrogen sulfate gas, and the source was identified as a flour mill that had pumped millions of liters of waste into the river ever since 1890.
Isn't that sickening?
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that we do stuff like that.
All right, let's talk about hydrogen sulfide. Did your family ever have a well? I didn't know if
I
you
don't
ever lived in a house that had a well.
know.
Okay. Lots of people around us have wells. I grew up in a house that had a well. And every now and then, the filtration system to the well would go down. And we would know it almost immediately because every time you turn on the faucet or flush a toilet, the water coming into the house would smell like rotten eggs. I'm sure
Okay.
this has happened to you. If you've already, sulfur, exactly. Like if you're walking by a house and the sprinklers are on and it smells a little funky, it's the sulfur in the well water.
Okay.
This rotten egg smell was created by the hydrogen sulfide in the well water that was being pumped out of the ground. Well water is notorious for having at least trace amounts of hydrogen sulfide because it is produced by decomposing plants and animal tissue. That makes sense, right? It's under the ground. Sure. Now, sulfur itself is the 10th most abundant element by mass in the universe and the 5th most common on Earth. That is not really relevant to our story necessarily, but I found it very interesting.
Very. I wouldn't have known that.
Interestingly, too, sulfur is used in matches, insecticide, fungicides, and many sulfur compounds are odoriferous. Are odoriferous, which is also a very fun word.
And
for example,
what does that mean? They smell?
Yes. Basically, they smell. Yes.
Okay.
For example, the smells of odorized natural gas, skunk scent, bad breath, grapefruit, and garlic are due to organosulfur compounds.
Okay.
And now you know.
Well, and funny, I don't know where this comes from, but the idea of sulfur for some reason like makes me think of like the devil.
Oh.
Is that a thing? Like the devil? Like, and it must be the smell. Like, I don't think this is like biblical or anything. I think it's just haunted house kind of stuff. But like when I think of sulfur, I think of like
or maybe
fire
in the matches.
and
You know that weird smell that matches give off? That's
yeah.
I couldn't say. I mean, sulfur itself is yellow, like the actual compound is yellow. Have you ever seen like stains in someone's house from sprinklers? That yellow stain? That's the sulfur in the water.
Okay.
But
okay.
I don't know that I've ever seen it related to the devil, but now I
think it's the smell.
Go look into that. Okay, so you're probably wondering, what the heck does hydrogen sulfide have to do with this case?
Yep. I'm not seeing how it's killing them yet.
Well, in general, hydrogen sulfide is simply a nuisance. Like, it's just in well water, it kind of stinks, it kind of discolors things, but it doesn't cause health problems. But in high concentrations, it can be toxic. A high concentration of hydrogen sulfide can be created when water housing the bacteria that creates this specific gas is stagnant for a period of time. In the case of the river, something like a dam might produce this effect. And it just so happens that Gilbert and Margaret were at such a place.
So would the idea be that they were in the water, or was just being around it, breathing it enough?
Just being around it, breathing it. And the way they describe this river is disgusting, which also makes me pause. Like, why would they have chosen this place?
Me too. I'm like, why are they choosing this place to hook up? I mean, they could go to a hotel. They're adults. They're not teenagers. There's other places to go than a stinky
Yeah,
river.
even if you were a fan of parks, don't go to the one next to the stinky river. Like, so again, there are still holes in this theory, even for me. But apparently, this river, like, you would walk along it and you could literally see these sulfuric gases like bubbling up. Like,
Ew.
it literally reminds me the way it was described. It's like this filthy river. It reminds me of like the tar pits, like the gross tar pits with
Yeah.
things bubbling out of it. And apparently they would be like these like blooms. So this bacteria that eats away at this plant and animal material creates this hydrogen sulfide as its byproduct. So it would build up in the soil, like the muddy bottom, and then like, bubble to the top. Doesn't that sound
Yeah,
disgusting?
it does. And I'm still left with the question. Okay, let's say that they just died from this natural gas that's occurring. Who covered them up? We're still left with that question.
And I can't say I have a great answer for you. There's a theory, but it's not a great one either. So, this original study of the river found that the worst concentrations of hydrogen sulfide in the Lane Cove River were found within a quarter mile of a weir, which is a low head dam, which had acted to stem the flushing of the river. And this is exactly where Gilbert and Margaret died. In addition, the location where they appeared to have laid down was also at water level in a slight depression surrounded by a bank and mangroves. So the hydrogen sulfide, which is heavier than air, could have like settled in this ditch after it bubbled to the top of the river and kind of like flowed out. Compounding this theory is that the night of New Year's Eve, it was very cool and very still. There was no breeze, which would have allowed higher than normal concentrations of hydrogen sulfide to accumulate. Most importantly, to me at least, the thing that I went, okay, that could be it. Hydrogen sulfide can cause purple discoloration in the blood of a victim.
Oh, well, I don't know, Stephanie. This kind of checks a lot of the boxes.
It does more than anything else, but as we've already brought up, there are still holes. My question, as we've been talking about, is why would these two intelligent individuals have chosen a spot next to a disgusting river that smells like rotten eggs to do what they're doing?
And okay, so it doesn't sound like the most romantic of places, but even that I can kind of get past because sometimes when the mood strikes, you know.
I think your moods must strike higher than mine because I still have standards.
I don't know, maybe that added to like the fun of it. Here we are, like, someplace we shouldn't be with someone who isn't my spouse. I don't know. I could probably get past that if that was the only weird thing. But for me, the whole covering up thing, that still is just a big question mark. Do we know how long after exposure to this substance death sets in? And like how it affects, like do you like lose control of your body? Because you brought up a great point earlier. Like if she did, say she pulled this box on top of her, why did she do that instead of pulling her dress down or her bra up? But would she have only been able to pull the box on top of her? I don't know. Do we know anything about how it affects us?
I'm going to tell you everything that I was able to find out.
Okay. I'm curious.
And some of this may also explain how they ended up there, even though I don't know. I'm still not completely buying it, but I'll tell you what I know and you tell me what you think.
Okay.
A British forensic scientist contacted by police suggested after reading the case report that it could have been possible that the victims may not have initially noticed the smell. Apparently, at low levels, hydrogen sulfide smells like rotten eggs, but at higher concentrations, it smells sickeningly sweet. Think like an unpleasant sweet perfume, like an overly sweet perfume. Yeah, so at very low levels, undetectable. Then it turns into rotten eggs, and then it turns into like this oversaturated sweet smell, which,
Yeah. Gross.
I kind of feel like sometimes that's like a weird, like crossover trash smell for me. That weird, like sweet trash, like just gross.
It it
Again, I would not have
yeah,
stopped there. I would not have stopped there myself. But again, maybe it was at the super low levels. And so they couldn't initially smell it.
sure.
Then, as the concentration rises, the gas paralyzes the olfactory nerve. So,
So
like
now
your
they
sense of
can't smell
smell.
it. Now
So
they can't.
now they can't smell it and the gas is invisible. So essentially, it would be undetectable and it would then cause vomiting and breathlessness.
And we know there was vomit found. We know whose vomit it was?
They didn't say, I mean, human
Okay.
vomit. That's all I know.
Okay.
Now, at the highest level, respiratory failure occurs within seconds.
Oh.
And at unimaginable levels, a single breath could cause instant cardiac arrest.
Okay, so that would explain like the state of their bodies as if she just fell over. He just fell over, she just fell over. Now they're not close to each other, right?
20 yards.
Which is not like they weren't in the middle of something when they died. There was some separation there.
Well,
Maybe one died sooner than the other. Maybe something happened to one of them and the other one was able to kind of try to escape or get away.
yeah, it's possible one succumbed quicker than the other. And if you're thinking about one of them, maybe stumbling around, remember her feet and her knees were dirty and her dress was dirty. So maybe she was rolling around. Like, I'm not sure. The carpet was found next to him. So maybe he succumbed to the poisonous effects of this gas quicker than she did. I don't know. We just don't know. We just don't know.
Right.
But based on this, here is what Peter Butts thinks happened in this scenario. He thinks that there was little to no gas around the time Gilbert and Margaret arrived. But then after they laid down, there was an eruption of gas upstream. And that gas was at a high enough concentration that they couldn't smell it. So the couple could have remained for some time before they started feeling this nausea and breathlessness. And of course, at this point, they wouldn't have known the cause because, again, they can't see it and they can't smell it. So subsequently, they would have become confused. And as a result of the hydrogen sulfide binding with the hemoglobin in the blood, which causes that purple color, it would have also reduced the oxygen carrying capacity, making it hard for them to escape and then leading to their demise.
I mean, that all checks.
But then who covered them up?
That's the question, and that's why I didn't ask it again because I've asked it many times, and, who covered him up?
Okay. This is all I have to offer on that topic. Apparently, in the early morning hours of New Year's Day, a greyhound trainer was out running his dogs along the Lane Cove River. This was, of course, illegal, so it was done in a hush-hush kind of way early in the morning. However, his truck was identified as being present at the scene, so he was questioned by police when the bodies were initially found. According to the initial report, he denied seeing the bodies, claiming he took a different path that day. However, in his 1977 obituary, so some 14 years later, his family claimed that he was the first to find the bodies in his obituary, which
Oh,
is totally weird.
claim to fame.
Of course, this captured the attention of the police who probed the family. This man's family stated that he was a bit of a prude and that after stumbling upon the dead, half-nude bodies, he covered them to protect their modesty. The theory is that he didn't call the police because he was also participating in an illegal activity, the dog racing.
Sure.
But I don't know. It sure would have been nice to hear it from him. So you know what I mean? We're like telephoning down the line. I mean, 14 years went by, never said anything, but then his family felt the need to like disclose this in his obituary, which seems very strange to me.
If he is the type of person who's going to come across two dead bodies, but then not report them, but then cover them up, I don't know. That's strange just in and of itself. So if you're strange enough to do that, then I guess you could be strange enough to keep it a secret all these years. I don't know. That's bizarre to me. You're going to find dead bodies and cover them up but not report them. That's weird. I
And
don't
why
know.
would his family put that in an obituary? I think that is so strange.
Oh, that is so weird. Unless, of course, it sounds like this is like a big mystery. It's a big mystery in this part of the world. So if you can say that your grandfather solved the mystery or was even part of the mystery, I wouldn't put that in somebody's obituary, but I don't know. The whole thing is just weird. I don't know what to think about that. I mean, I guess it would answer the question. It would answer the big question. And honestly, something like that actually makes the most sense. If you go with the fact that this was just, they just were in the wrong place at the wrong time and it was accidental, that they were exposed to this, that does make the most sense. It explains why they were covered up. But how bizarre.
I do think it's strange. I mean, maybe they were just trying to inject their family member into local lore.
Right.
Or maybe he really did see them. I don't
I
know.
can see him even seeing them and not reporting it, because he was doing something illegal himself. But I'm going to see this. I'm going to be so offended by their nudity that I'm going to cover it up. But I'm not going to say anything about it because I myself am also involved in something illegal. That's the part that just doesn't make sense to me. Like, you
Right.
see it and you keep moving and you don't say anything, fine.
Right.
You see it and
Right.
you report it, fine. But I'm offended by their nudity, but not by the fact that there's 2 dead people laying here. Like, that
Right.
doesn't bother me. Like, I can keep going about my day there. That's just weird.
It seems just strange to me. I'm not saying it didn't happen. We've heard stranger things. Maybe he thought they had, again, there were all these new street drugs, the LSDs and things like that. Maybe he thought they just overdosed. Yeah, I don't know. So that's all I have for you. So if you would like to wrap this up in a kind of nice bow, I guess that's what you can use. But I still have questions.
I think that out of all the possibilities that we've talked about today, that probably makes the most sense. And it probably does make the most sense that this greyhound racer covered him up. It makes the most sense. But the whole thing is so weird and bizarre.
Yeah.
Talk about freaky.
I have one more thing to add. 6 years after Peter Butt's 2006 documentary on the case was released, he claims he was contacted by a retired psychologist with another piece of information. The psychologist had rescued a young girl from being assaulted in a park years after Margaret and Gilbert's death. The girl claimed to have been at Lane Cove River the morning the pair were killed. Apparently, the woman had also been at the park with another woman for the same reason we presume Margaret and Gilbert were at the park. As this woman was leaving, she realized she had lost her purse. As she and her companion were retracing their steps, they saw another couple arrive. Now, trying not to be seen, they both crouched in the bushes. And as they watched, Margaret and Gilbert began to engage in sexual activity. Now, according to this psychologist, the witness said, quote, "At some point, the woman said loudly, 'Why have you stopped?' He said nothing, and she asked him to keep going. Then suddenly the woman grabbed her throat and made a strangling noise and got up and staggered off. After a few minutes, the man rolled over or moved some short distance, and my memory suggests she said he moved away from the river and up the slope." Remember, this is now like the witness through the psychologist to Peter Butt and now to us. So again, a bit of a telephone game. But this psychologist reported that the woman went on, quote, "They waited a little while till there was no noise to look for the purse. They smelled some rotten egg gas, but it seemed to go away as they moved closer to the edge of the water. As they searched, they discussed why the couple had acted so strangely and just assumed they'd been on drugs or something," end quote.
That kind of confirms the theory.
If, again, this turns out to be true. As it turns out, a pathology report, which was originally suppressed by the coroner at the time of the deaths, revealed semen on Gilbert's body and coat, suggesting that sex was taking place when both victims were affected, making it unlikely that they ingested the toxin before arriving at the park. So, I don't know, take these last few things with a grain of salt, the greyhound racer and then this report from the psychologist, because again, the woman herself has never actually been interviewed about this. I don't know, 60 years on, this case is still unsolved, and more than likely it will never be officially solved because there's no more tissue to test. They've run out of tissue. There's nothing left to test. So if the case was closed, it would be based on just circumstantial evidence. Could there still be a bad guy out there? Maybe. Or this could have just been two people in the wrong place at the right time.
Wow. Moral of the story, splurge for the hotel.
Right. Right. And don't go next to weird rivers. You never know what's out there.
Yowza. Yowza. Especially in Australia. Even if the gases don't get you. I mean, there could be crocodiles in those rivers.
I think the poisonous gas got to all the crocodiles, but yeah. Point taken. If the crocodiles don't get you, the poisonous gas will. So watch yourself.
Man. It brings new meaning to the saying, what is it? Like everything in Australia is trying to kill you, including like the waterways.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, the air.
Yeah.
The air, the water, the land.
Everything.
It's all trying to get you.
That's why they're such tough people. That's why they're so cool. The ones that survive, they're pretty cool.
No, seriously. I was like, well, of course this came out of Australia. Of course this case is Australian. Of course it is.
I only wish I could be as cool as any Australian.
Oh, yeah. People from Sydney, I'm like, you guys, I couldn't even get close to that amount of cool.
No. Not even going to try. Wow, what a weird one, Stephanie. Yeah, I hadn't heard of that. Wild case.
Yeah, and I got to bring Paul Holes into it too, so made my day.
That's right. Anytime. What's so funny is the episode I'm bringing you next week, Paul Holes had a little bit of involvement in that case, in reviewing it afterwards, and I thought of you.
Oh, the universe is bringing us together.
That's right. Just a matter of time. Maybe one day we'll share a panel at some true crime podcast convention and we'll be on the same stage as Paul Holes.
No, I will be a sweaty mess. I don't know that I could do it. I mean, I would try to man up. I really would, but I don't know. Like, I'm typically not a fangirl kind of girl, but I mean, my husband, he's incredibly smart, and I just love that. I just love intellectual conversations. But the interest in true crime, makes it even more appealing too. So I'm into that.
I get it.
Now I could talk to him about hydrogen sulfide. Like, I actually know what I'm talking about.
You guys can talk about this case.
Yeah.
Maybe together. Maybe that's what this case is missing. The two of you together as a team.
Oh my gosh. Get lost, Cynthia. Paul Holes is coming on.
I knew it would happen. Never mind. Let's not share a panel with Paul Holes. I don't want to take that chance.
No, I actually love anyone who hasn't listened to Buried Bones. It's a fantastic podcast. I think Kate Winkler is Kate Winkler Dawson. I think that's her full name. Anyway, I think she's a very cool chick too. I would like to hang out with her as well. So she's a true crime writer, and I think she does a fantastic job. And I really like the two of them together. So I would never want to replace Kate, but I'm just saying, I'm around. Just saying.
That's right. We'll grab drinks after,
That's right.
Well, we have a really, really cool Branch of Hope recipient this month. It's the Exodus Road. And I am so excited that we get to sponsor them this month. Over 50 million people are trapped in modern slavery right now. But as Exodus Road says on their website, these people are not statistics. They're human beings with names, dreams, and stories that matter. And the Exodus Road is working to help end human trafficking. The Exodus Road is working to collect expertise across the globe to help fight against trafficking. They have a Traffic Watch Academy program that educates law enforcement, NGO practitioners, students, and communities with engaging quality content from diverse leaders in the counter-trafficking community. As Stephanie and I have alluded to in previous weeks, the people here at the Exodus Road, these are real-life superheroes. They are the boots on the ground out there working hard to end human trafficking. Is there anything more amazing than that? I mean, is that just not the coolest thing, the most amazing mission? These people are out there seeing things, they're walking into rooms that I personally could never walk into. They're seeing horrible things no human has ever been meant to see, and they're doing it for the greater good. I just think that's amazing.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think they are wonderful and so pleased to partner with them this month. Know that if you are part of our Patreon, your dollars are also going to help sponsor Exodus Road and their fight to free those in sex slavery and human trafficking.
It's amazing. So excited to be a part of this collaboration this month.
Absolutely. Okay, friends. Well, thanks for listening to a bit of my personal journey at the beginning of this case, and then for hanging in there for this case, because again, question mark. Let us know what you think. Do you think the dog trainer and this witness, do you think they're real? Do you think any of that's real? I don't know. What do you guys think happened? Because I don't really know. Peter Butts thinks he knows what happened, but case is still open. Let us know what you think.
That's right. Join us next week. I'm going to tell you all about the brutal death of 20-year-old Jaliyah Davis. That's one that the community is divided. There are some people who think she died as a result of a horrible accident, and many other people who think she died as the result of murder. So come back next week and tell us what you think.
All right. I'll be here.
All right, Shiver Seekers. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Oh, well, I'll be here. I'll be here unless I'm with Paul Holes. Okay, bye.
Okay. Rude.
This episode of The Dark Oak was created, researched, written, recorded, hosted, edited, published, and marketed by Cynthia and Stephanie of Just Us Gals Productions, and made possible by you, our shiver-seeking listener. Special thanks goes to Justice Himes for our incredible artwork and Ryan Crete for our amazing music.